Console modding is a great way to breathe new life into one of your favorite game consoles that would have otherwise been past their prime. The consoles that benefit the most from modification, in my honest opinion, are handhelds. They're portable, powerful, and can do a lot of really great things. Currently, three of the most popular handhelds to mod are the PSP, the Nintendo 3DS/2DS, and the PlayStation Vita. What I want to do today is I want to compare these three powerhouse handhelds, talk about what they can do while modded, and give my opinion as to which one I feel is the best modded handheld to own. Now, before we get into these handheld game consoles, I have to address the elephant in the room. I know I'm going to get a ton of comments in the comment section talking about this, so I just want to clear the air first. If retro emulation is your thing, and that's the primary focus as to why you want a modded console, the best handheld that you can own is honestly a modern smartphone. Even a middle tier smartphone is capable of emulating a ton of retro consoles. They sell a ton of controller options for both Android as well as iOS, and a lot of modern smartphones can even emulate some of the consoles that are in this video. So if retro emulation is really your thing, your best bet would be to get a decent smartphone. Okay, now back to the consoles. Let's start out with the PSP. The PSP is the oldest console on this list, but despite its age, it's still capable of doing a ton of great things. First, I want to talk about some hardware modifications. The best hardware mod, in my opinion, are these SD card adapters that allow you to expand the memory using a micro SD card and stick it right into the console's Memory Stick Pro Dual slot. This allows you to load the PSP up with a ton of games, ROMs, and homebrew. In terms of games that the console is capable of playing, the games were ran using the console's UMD drive, as well as downloading games digitally from Sony's Play Store. With a modded PSP, you never have to use a UMD again. All of the games that you acquire get loaded directly onto the memory stick. The PSP's library is absolutely legendary and is home to some of the great Sony franchises. When it comes to games on the actual console, in my opinion, I feel that the PSP has the strongest library of the three. Now, when it comes to retro emulation, the PSP can handle all of your 8-bit and 16-bit consoles with relative ease. The console was also designed to play ports of PlayStation 1 games, so it runs PlayStation 1 ROMs pretty smoothly as well. The console can run a handful of N64 games really well, but struggles with some of the more high-end games. Another great thing about the PSP is that you have a ton of models available of the console. There's the 1000, 2000, and 3000 versions of the console, as well as the PSP Go. There's also the PSP Street, which I've never owned, but I hear is probably the weakest of the console variants. All in all, the PSP is the weakest of the three consoles on this list, but makes up for it with its absolutely stacked library of games. Moving on to the 3DS and 2DS family of consoles. I'm only going to be focusing on two in this video, which is the new 3DS as well as the 2DS XL. You can mod an original 3DS or 2DS console, but the system's hardware makes it very limiting, and you'll probably get less functionality than that of a PSP. I feel to get the most out of this console, you want to get your hands on a new 3DS or 2DS XL and mod one of them. The 3DS was home to a tremendous library of games. And if its own library wasn't good enough, the console is completely backwards compatible with original DS games. So essentially, you have two complete libraries at your disposal. Two hardware mods that I highly recommend for the 3DS. The first is to replace this little control stick nub, the C nub or C stick nub, whatever it was called. It's really easy to swap out and replace with the PSP analog stick. It's a super simple process. You just break off the rubber and the PSP replacement analog stick pops right in. Another absolutely great hardware mod is to get one of these R4 cards. This is a tool that made the original DS modding possible, and seeing as how the 3DS is fully backwards compatible, it works every bit as good with the 3DS, allowing you to load a micro SD card up with a ton of great original DS games. Now, if you want to play actual 3DS games, you're going to need to install custom firmware on your console, which is a pretty straightforward process. It's nothing too difficult, but does require the use of a computer. When it comes to retro emulation, similar to the PSP, it's going to run all of your 8-bit and 16-bit consoles very easily. And when it comes to N64, you'll get slightly better performance on this thing than you would on a PSP, but there's still a few games that do not run well. All in all, the new 3DS is a great modded console that in recent months has become a little bit difficult to get your hands on. Its recent popularity as a modded console has made finding a new 3DS or a 2DS XL in decent working condition a little bit more difficult than what it is to find a decent working PSP. Moving on to the PlayStation Vita, the Vita is the most powerful console of the three on this list. When it comes to retro emulation, it's definitely the best of the three. You can easily emulate 8-bit, 16-bit, Nintendo 64. It can even run some Dreamcast games. But more power doesn't always mean better, because when it comes to the actual PlayStation Vita library of games, it has the weakest library of the three. There are still some really great games on the PlayStation Vita, but compared to the PSP and the Nintendo 3DS, they seem few and far between. To get full functionality out of a modded PS Vita, you need to install custom firmware. And once you do that, you can actually exploit the console's built-in PSP capabilities. And you can switch between PlayStation Vita and PSP pretty much at the push of a button. Everything that runs on the PSP will run on the PlayStation Vita once it's modded. The PlayStation Vita's homebrew scene seems to have taken things to a whole nother level. Not only are there a ton of great fan-made games, the Vita's homebrew scene has actually managed to port over a ton of really great console games, making this thing an absolute beast, capable of playing damn near 7 generations of video games. There are 2 different models available of the console, and they both run equally as good while modded, but the preferred version of the console is the original 1000 model that came with an OLED screen. Everything just looks so much better on this version of the console, and it's the one that I recommend the most. So now for the moment of truth, which console of these 3 do I think is the best modded console to own? Guys, it's extremely hard to argue against the PlayStation Vita. The thing is absolutely ridiculous. It has all of the functionality of a PlayStation Portable, along with the extra features of the PS Vita. When it comes to sheer horsepower, the PlayStation Vita is the best modded console to own. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the one that I recommend. As of the making of this video, PlayStation Vitas are still pretty expensive. You'd be lucky to find one in halfway decent working order for under $150. That's pretty steep considering this console is coming up on a decade old. On top of that, for $50 more, you could get a Nintendo Switch. Now when it comes to the Nintendo 3DS, it's kind of in a similar boat as the Vita. It's a fantastic console to mod, but due to its scarcity, recent inflation, and the fact that the games for it are slightly more difficult to acquire, prevents it from being number 1 on my list. Personally, I think if you don't own any of these consoles and you're looking for one to have, mod, and enjoy, I gotta go with the PSP. I understand this thing is ancient, but it has the best library of games out of the 3. It does a really good job of taking care of your retro gaming needs as well, and these things are super easy to mod. Not to mention, finding games for the console is as simple as a Google search, and the modding process is super simple and straightforward, kind of puts it head and shoulders above the others. So while the PlayStation Vita might be the best modded handheld on this list, the one that I personally recommend the most is a PSP. And I know that a lot of you are going to say that modern smartphones can do everything that the PSP does, including emulate PSP games. And I'm not arguing that. All I'm saying is that if you do not own any of these 3 consoles, the one that's easily available, the cheapest one to purchase, the easiest one to mod, and the one that has the best library is the PSP. If you own a 3DS, a modded 3DS is the modded console for you. If you own a PlayStation Vita, the PlayStation Vita is the modded console for you. If you own all 3 and don't know which one to mod, the answer is easy. It's the Vita. The Vita is the best one of the 3, hands down. But if I was completely new to all of this, never modded a console before, and don't own any of these 3, I'd run out and grab a PSP. There's really no wrong answer. All 3 of these consoles are great, and having them modded only makes them even better. I hope that in some way I've encouraged you to run out and get any one of these 3 consoles, because they really are fantastic. Hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time, this is Ness, signing out.